the brain is a scary organ to not function, because as we know, it's our life force. And especially where your brainstem is, that's what helps you breathe and helps your heart rate. So, you know, although for adults, we tend to see that the heart tends to be something that causes more concern just because of the older we get, our heart tends to get, less healthy, especially with what we do with our bodies, as you know. But with kids, it's more of can be more of a lung thing or than a brain thing as well. And so you're right. Any type of, as being a mom and you're seeing this happening, and I don't carry oxygen at home, and I don't have, pulse oxes at home and those kind of things. I ended up getting all that, but it's a very scary situation to see anybody have a medical in your own child. When I'm in the hospital and I'm going to a code blue and for a baby or an adult, and I'm rushing to the bedside, I'm in that nurse mode and I know what to do and I make decisions fast and I'm very calm. And, it's just amazing how you can turn that switch on. But when you're at home with your child, that switch does not come
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is. In British Columbia on the West Coast, right? Right. And there's a big city called Vancouver, right? And where are you, John? Me? Well, we are 500 miles north or 800 kilometers north of Vancouver. And for all our European friends. And Prince George, about 80,000 people, lots of forests, lots of trees. And within 50 miles, we probably got 100 lakes around Prince George and lots of friends. Black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, wolves, foxes, you name it, we have them all, and we call it paradise. Today we got a very interesting guest. Her name is Constance Lewis. Constance Lewis. And Constance is married to Andre and are the passionate parents of Miles, who has a colorful cape of feelings it took inspiring their son Miles, who underwent brain surgery at just 6 years old. And obviously emotional for a couple in particular, but in Constance's case in particular, since they and her husband both are familiar with the medical system. Andrew Lewis is a dental, I believe, pediatric dentist, and Constance is a woman health nurse practitioner. So their familiarity, they have, I believe, 3 children, and and especially with Miles, it must be, as a parent myself and a grandparent, so the emotions relating to the well-being of your children in particular always is a challenge, but even more so if it involves health issues, and in particular from a layperson's perspective, but also from obviously people that are familiar with it. Brain surgery at the age of 6 is fearsome, to say the least, and it led both you and your husband and Miles and your family towards becoming authors and telling the story and sharing it with the rest of the world as we are doing today. Constance, welcome to the show. And tell
Thank you.
us more about you and your background. Where are you from originally? And as a couple, the which areas were you involved in, and your educational background, and then your family, and then the well-being of Miles at 6 years old being diagnosed, and then that, reading through your bio, changed your life.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Oh, yes, I am a women's health nurse practitioner. I knew from a very young age I wanted to be a nurse, and so became that at the age of 21. And I started working in the neonatal intensive care unit. So I worked there for about 12 to 13 years, loved it. I was a childbirth educator, a lactation nurse, and then when I started having children, I wanted to move more to a job that was easier to get to and from without doing night shift and things like that. So I became a women's health nurse practitioner and worked in an OBGYN office and had my 3 children. My husband is a pediatric dentist, and he's been doing that for well over 15 years. And we have a beautiful family. We live in Florida, Bradenton, Sarasota area in Florida. So it's very hot here. I'm jealous of your beautiful weather and your caribou and your bears. Yeah, so together we created this beautiful family. And Miles Lewis, my firstborn son, at the age of 4, out of nowhere, started having seizures, and it was shocking. And at first, the first one he had, we were told it was a febrile seizure, so a fever seizure, and it just didn't sit right in my stomach and my gut. And I just thought, I don't really think that's right. But again, I am a medical professional, but obviously when it comes to your children, you try to step away from the medical side, right? You're the parent. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to trust that diagnosis. And then 3 months later he had another seizure, and then at that point we knew that it wasn't from a fever. And 2 years later, lots of different doctors, lots of different testing, lots of going back and forth with the doctors on medications. It was found that he had a brain lesion, and they said he needs brain surgery. And he had brain surgery a year ago in May. And I can happily report that he has been seizure free since his brain surgery. And he is now 7, seizure free, and we're weaning off his medication right now.
And he is about 11 now or 12?
No, actually, he's 7 now.
7, okay.
Yeah,
And,
7. Yeah.
and so this was only a year ago then.
He had brain surgery a year ago, and 2 years before that, he was diagnosed at age 4.
So, brain lesion, you said, what does that mean to us lay people?
Yes. So when he was born, when he was being developed inside the belly, we say in utero,
Yeah.
he had an area in his brain. It was actually the left parietal temporal lobe that didn't develop appropriately. It developed, the cells were dysplastic, which means they were unorganized as they were built in that area of the brain. And he was normal, healthy baby, normal child up till age 4, and then all of a sudden, this area of the brain just started going into electrical spasm and sending out these seizures because it was an area of the brain that was not correct. It had a lesion, it was dysfunction. And
Now,
so,
again, for them, it's 4 years old, small
mhm,
little boy, really.
yeah,
Then
yeah.
seizures.
Mhm.
And just again for people watching us, the lay people, what does it mean, a seizure? How does it project itself?
Good question. Everybody has different ways that a seizure can project itself, and some people have full body seizures, some people have one side seizures, um, some people have the body shaking, some people just have an absentness. So it really depends on what area in the brain that you have the seizure, that you have that electrical abnormality. So what happened was Miles, my son, how his presented is he would get an aura. So he would, which is very hard as a parent to imagine this, but he would feel like he was, all of a sudden, he would feel like he was in a haunted house, or uh, wolves or zombies or ghosts would be trying to attack him. So he would see the world around him, but it would be blurry. And in front of this face, these scary things would happen because it's a fight or flight sense in your brain. So he would see these things. He would say, Mommy, the nightmares are happening. And then he would kind of blank stare and then kind of lip smack. And then if it was a bad seizure, he would go into a full on compulsion of body shaking, turning blue, pale. We'd have to call 911 because
Oof.
his seizure medication wouldn't work. So it was
Oof.
very emotional and very intense, even for being a medical provider. And I've seen a lot of stuff in my lifetime. It was
Both for
tough.
you and Andrea, have medical backgrounds and are
Hmm.
informed
Yeah.
individuals, are relatively speaking, in terms of if
Mhm.
this happens, then at what point you push the button and saying, this
Mhm.
is not normal,
Right.
exceptional. So, and then especially thinking in terms of brain, we
Yeah.
think, again, as a layperson, that strokes are not uncommon to
Mhm.
people, usually at older age, 40, 50, and yet and older, and depending on whatever happens, but they could well include seizures or
Mhm.
bleeding of some sort or another, and all of it not good, but you have to be, but we know already from trying to be informed as much as we can
Mhm.
about that if there are indications of stroke related issues,
Mhm.
the sooner you get to a hospital, the better, because it can go very quickly the wrong way unless you do
Mhm.
something about it.
Correct. Correct. And the brain is a scary organ to not function because, as we know, it's our life force. And especially where your brainstem is, that's what helps you breathe and helps your heart rate. So, you know, although for adults, we tend to see that the heart tends to be something that causes more concern just because of the older we get, our heart tends to get, less healthy, especially with what we do with our bodies, as you know. But with kids, it's more of can be more of a lung thing or than a brain thing as well. And so you're right. Any type of, as being a mom and you're seeing this happening, and I don't carry oxygen at home, and I don't have, pulse oxes at home and those kind of things. I ended up getting all that, but it's a very scary situation to see anybody have a medical in your own child. When I'm in the hospital and I'm going to a code blue and for a baby or an adult, and I'm rushing to the bedside, I'm in that nurse mode and I know what to do and I make decisions fast and I'm very calm. And, it's just amazing how you can turn that switch on. But when you're at home with your child, that switch does not come on. It's very scary.
That's emotions overriding all the other things. This is
Exactly.
at home. Now, the Miles is the oldest. Your other two children are, the younger, and boy, girl are, and so how old were they, or are they?
So I have Miles is 7 now. I have a 5-year-old girl named Mariah, and then I have an almost 2-year-old boy named Micah. I had children a little bit later on in life due to some fertility issues, but they are beautiful. But the hard part about it was exactly that. My child, Mariah, who was only 2, when she saw her brother having these seizures. And then I remember actually very sadly, Miles's the very worst seizure he ever had, and the very last worst one that he had was on her birthday when she
Oof,
turned 4 years old.
oof.
And luckily, she was asleep because she likes to sleep in. But when she woke up for her birthday celebration, her dad was not there because he was in the ambulance going to the hospital with Miles, and it was me and my mom that were there. So it just really affects their lives too in a way that you don't realize. You think they don't really know or pay attention, but they truly feel that energy and they know.
Isn't
So
it
yes, it was.
amazing, that
Yeah.
I've gone through quite a bit myself. I was born. Uh, I'm going to be in the next 2 months. I'm going 2 or 3 months. I'm going to be 85 years young, and
Yeah.
so and but I was born in 1940 in northeastern Holland, and that was during the war years, and saw far too much that we should not have seen, and all of those kind of things. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but
Yeah.
especially as it relates to age,
Mhm.
and anxiety and all of that sort of thing is
Yes.
very much, like I remember things from the time that I was
Mhm.
3.5 years old, with
Mhm.
bombers overhead,
Yes.
Allied bombers bombing northeastern part of Germany, or northwestern part of Germany, and we were about 10-15 minutes from the border. My mom would take us outside in the nights in particular, with hundreds of planes in the air, not to look at
Mhm.
planes, but she felt safer outside than inside. And in the
Yeah.
distance, we saw cities burning, the sky being red.
Yes.
But I remember from the time that I was 3.5 years old, I remember the hunger years in 1944 in particular, when there was no food. I can still feel,
Feel
even
that.
now, still the feeling of hunger and fear and anxiety. And,
Yes.
and from the time that I was 4 years old. And then we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. It made such an impression on me that I knew when I grew up I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada,
Yeah.
and I did. And
Mhm.
so the point that I'm making is that if you talk about your Micah in particular, the youngest one that was then 4, and that emotions and all of that is very, very
Mhm.
much still part of it, that I can relate to that. And a lot of times
Mhm.
when I look at my grandchildren in particular and saying, yeah, I remember from the times in particular,
Mhm.
emotions. And then, as you can well appreciate, war years. My dad was drafted into the Dutch army in April of 1940, and the last they heard from him was just before the bombing of Rotterdam, where
Mhm.
thousands of people were died. And for 5 years, my mom wouldn't know if he lived or died.
Yeah.
And
Ugh.
and so things were tough. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and remembering and the emotions that go with that and
Yeah.
anxiety. I got counseling for the inner child actually in my 50th birth,
Mhm.
when I was 50 years old, and
Yeah.
and and even then it was immensely emotional.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you brought up your inner child because I really believe in that in my practice now. Now that I'm not working at the bedside anymore because I had to quit working as a nurse practitioner because I had a newborn and then I also had Miles's medical condition and I was constantly taking him to appointments and I couldn't physically go to a job anymore. So I developed a business at home that I do now as a coach and I'm a life coach for fertility and postpartum and moms and sleep, but the inner child work is very important. And even for Miles, who experienced these seizures and these nightmares that were in front of his face as these seizures were coming, is still traumatic for him. And he feels that in his body sometimes still, even though he's not having the seizures. And even Mariah, the daughter that had all these things when she was young as well, watching this, we were so focused on him and because it was a fight or flight sense. I was always in a fight or flight. When is the next seizure? When is it going to come? I was always on eggshells. And so I feel like the 2 years of my life went by in fight or flight, always expecting a seizure. So because of that focus wasn't on her as much and her, raising her. I mean, we are a beautiful family and we're wonderful parents, but also when you're in that, you're not as present with your other children, right? And the
And
baby was breastfeeding, so that was connection. But with her, now that I'm seeing this come out, she needs that extra connection because of what happened.
because he felt the anxiety, right?
Yes,
And you may not have expressed it, but she would have felt it, so,
totally.
and it stayed with her. And
It does.
hence, and just talking about the inner child, I never even knew what it was and all the other things until
Mm.
that my then girlfriend, and then fiance, and then now my wife, we
Mhm.
went through some challenging times, and so we got counseling. And during the
Yeah.
counseling, the counselor said, I kind of like to talk to John on his own, about the inner child.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and we all agree to that. And
Yeah.
so and but immensely emotional, even in my 50s, mid 50s, and
Hmm.
very, very important, and very, very
Yeah.
important to understand it as to the effect that a young child will have into becoming an adult, and even later in life, to deal with those issues are
Right.
immensely important.
And yes, because like you said, it'll come up later on in life and it'll affect their other relationships. And so my husband and I have worked really hard on finding other support systems, counselors and play therapists to help both of them kind of at an early start because we knew. And so they're still doing that. And that's where the concept of the book actually came to fruition, is through that emotion that he was dealing with.
So, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, is that, again, coming back to the inner child, a lot of people, and especially males,
Yeah.
and to a certain extent females, have difficulty expressing emotions. And
Yes.
especially males have a bit of a habit in saying, "No, I'm too tough for this. I don't need counseling. I don't need this," and all of that. So with me, I was fortunate under the circumstances that I had a
Mhm.
counselor that identify that area, and not all counselors do, and about something that I not heard about before, but it affect the relationship, and we've been together now, I think 42 years or so. But
Mhm.
still a very important part of my life, in looking back again, how important early life emotions that are sometimes not on purpose but overlooked because of
Yes.
circumstances that we are so collectively as a family, with then 3 kids in the early 40s, that we sometimes, and especially in those years, did not know exactly how to go forward, where it is becoming more open and people communicate more about it, but still not anywhere near where we should be, in my opinion.
Correct. Yeah, I love that you brought that up because that is the truth, is that we are getting better as a society. I feel that to be a little more comfortable where with expressing our emotions, and I hear less moms and dads saying, "Oh, you're a boy, suck it up, toughen up. Don't you boys don't cry," all those things, right, that
Yeah,
we heard growing up.
yeah,
So I think that we are getting better, but you're right, there's a lot more room. And I think that when you're told that as a child, um, that affects you in the future, and also in your health. The research shows that men, especially because they're the ones that tend to suppress their emotions more,
yeah.
that the more you suppress those emotions instead of deal with them, the more unhealthy your life at the end is going to be. The more sickness, the more illness, because if you're not expressing it and getting it out in one way, it's gonna come out physically.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
so that's why it is important for me to express it in my podcasting that I do. And I've learned, acquired the skills. I was no different than most other people that you were. I had never even heard about, the inner child or
Mhm.
emotional challenges that I still remember, and especially of early childhood. And even now, I find it very, very important, and especially the world, the way things are today. If you look around the world with all the news media we have, with all the things that we're getting exposed to, not only
Right.
as seniors that understand
Yep.
it, but also as young people and kids, that
Yeah.
we see all the things happening in Europe, and in particular the Ukraine,
Yes.
then Middle East, and then all the bombing. I'm not saying that it should or that should it, but
Mhm.
all the things that are going on, where the and what goes through my mind, not offering opinions politically, but simply saying that all that will affect, in particular, young people like it did me when I was
Correct.
3 years old, and all the challenges and feeling the anxiety of the
Mhm.
families around us, that it becomes so
Mhm.
critically important that hopefully in our lives we will be more open to issues relating to emotional well-being and understanding, both on the parent side as well as the younger children, growing up. And but drew my attention as well is that with Miles, I have a bit of a picture here of him.
Yeah.
Now at 7,
Yep.
uh, became an author in a way of not only expressing his emotions, but how
Mhm.
can we in him, and obviously with the help of parents that understand the critical parts of emotions to the parents and the children, how can we express it in books? And you did that, and the
Mhm.
books here, I see 4 underneath it, are part of it. So tell us the story how this became part of Miles' life, your lives, and then sharing it with all the other people, and then being on my podcast here today while we are. The amazing part, Constance, about podcasting is that we're podcasting around the world. Podcasting
Mhm.
has become such an important part, I believe, of media. And it's only even now at the beginning that it's still expanding further and further around the world. It's one of the most important medias that where we can share, in particular, emotions, but a lot of other issues and
Mhm.
discussions like you and me are having here today about similarities that I experience with your kids and your family, and as
Mhm.
we go through, and millions and millions of people will have around the world as they watch our show, and I believe that's why it is so important, and that's why media is so important. And I hope
Mhm.
that before we get further at some point, that you will share with us your website and how to access the books. And then the other part is to subscribe to our podcasting. That will stimulate me and you and others to
Mhm.
do more of these podcasts and sharing it with millions of people around the world. And
Yes.
I'm proud to say that we are approaching 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And that means if we have close to, I think we're close to 900,000 right now, and hopefully get to 1 million by about August. What does that mean? I'm not just bragging about it. I'm proud of it, but I'm
Yeah, you
also
should
saying
be.
how important it is, because if it
Yes.
is that on YouTube, it probably is double or triple that on other platforms, and people
Yes.
around the world will see it. And that's the most important part of it from my perspective, is that we share things
Mm.
like this and emotions associated with it, and where do we go from here. It is helpful for that purpose.
You brought up such a good point about what you and I are trying to do. And we're really essentially trying to bring education and support and connection through podcasting. And so that's my goal as well as it is yours. And just making people feel not so alone, especially as a parent with kids. And how do we incorporate that conversation of feelings into our lives with our children, right? So I'm a very emotionally aware person. I always have been comfortable with emotions, but I will tell you that when my child, either of them, all three of them, but specifically when Miles was going through the seizures, when he was having big emotions, I would get very uncomfortable and I would want to fix it right away.
Yeah.
Let me try to fix this emotion, right? I'm uncomfortable because he's having these big feelings and I just want to fix it. But we can't always fix it.
No.
And so how do we feel more comfortable when our children are having these big emotions and big feelings? And then because we're feeling less out of control and less uncomfortable and like less that we have to fix it, we can turn it around and we can give them the tools to help them walk through that feeling and get it out in a healthy way. So the idea of the book is fascinating because I never thought I was going to write a children's book. Never, ever. This thought never crossed my mind. And it just came to me one night, and Miles is a very emotionally intelligent child as well. We've really worked hard with him on that, but I will tell you, when after he would have a seizure, he would be in a post-ictal status is what it's called, and that's basically where he felt groggy or tired or couldn't really talk or speak well. Or when we were going to doctor's appointments and he had to get stuck by needles and he had to get blood drawn, like all these things, right? Take different medications, and they made him feel weird and he couldn't explain it. So I thought in my head, if this emotionally intelligent child cannot express his emotions with words, how do I get him to tell me how he's feeling without words so that I can give him the tools or support him in the way he needed? So the idea of colors, connecting colors with emotions came to me. And then also, Miles loves superheroes and he loves to dress up as a superhero, especially at 4. He's 7 now. So he's starting to get out of that a little bit, which makes me sad. I understand his age, but he would put on the suit. He loved Spider-Man. Spider-Man was his jam, right? He would put on Superman, Spider-Man, and Batman, and he had all the costumes and he had all the capes. And I thought, if I could get him to put on the color cape that he's feeling in that moment, he wouldn't have to use his words. He could just walk out. He would have that color cape on. I would know how he's feeling. And then I could either support him, give him the tools to walk through it, or just be there with him and present. But I would know, or us as a family would know, and he wouldn't have to use his words. And so that's how the idea came about. I'm like, I'm going to write a children's book. I've never, like, me write a children's book? This is weird. So I said, all right, let's do it. But I sat on it for a little while because I didn't really know what to write about. And then one night it just came to me and I wrote the whole book in one night. And my husband helped me rhyme it because he's very good at rhyming. And I was like, I want the book to rhyme. He's like, that's even more difficult to write in a book. I don't know. I just wanted to rhyme. So we did.
I want to show our guests watching us a picture of you and Andre as well.
Yeah.
It's not a very big picture, but I believe you can see it. So because that was a very important part of it too. Your team being yourself, Andre, and then and having the inspiration and the support of everybody to make you successful. So then that created the first book.
Yes. Yeah. So
now I
enough,
have to share another thing with you because it's so important as you explain it, that the importance for Miles, but also for you and Andre, and for sending the message to other people that how do you unlock the emotions of the young person that is maybe having difficulty to articulating it in words, but how can you do that? And that's what brought you to the book. And I had an experience that I'm scrambling a little bit with different things because I get so excited about this. Is that I had another issue happen to me. Academically, I was not very successful in Holland. I left Holland when I was 24 to go to the land of my dreams, Canada. So I've been here now for 60 years. But academically, I was not successful. I failed grade 3. I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And my parents were beautiful people, and some people said to them, send them to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. And it would be a long, long time, and me going through all the emotions about being told, well, I will not amount to much, and all of that kind of stuff, until 1997. I walked into a store here in Prince George. I already was doing well here, started with nothing, and I picked up a book, and I don't know why I did pick it up,
Yeah.
and the book's title was Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Hollowell. And the book is about ADHD and dyslexia. Dr. Hollowell wrote 18 books, is very successful in regard to ADHD and other issues globally. And he wrote this book in 1993. I picked it up in January 1997. I wrote in it in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am.
Wow.
And so, but I wrote it in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. It was implied that it is a mental deficiency of some description, which it
Right.
obviously isn't.
No.
I call it now, after I read the book several times and studied it on Google and all the other kind of things, I came to the conclusion it's a superpower. And I wrote a book about that in ADHD Unlocked.
I love that.
And so and what I was really going to share with you is that I am also a public speaker, and I did a presentation to Alberta is the province next to us, British Columbia, Alberta, and I did a presentation about ADHD to about 400 or 500 people that are all directly and indirectly relating to ADHD. And there was a young boy that came to see me, or his mom came to see me, and unfortunately I don't have the other part with me, but in any event, he came to me and he is ADHD, but he wrote a book. And he
Wow.
told me, together with his mom, before I did the presentation, that he had written a book, so that was exciting, and being ADHD, and so then I had to do my presentation, and during the presentation, which was about an hour, and then questions and answers, and we had a lot of questions. And I love presenting. I'm a storyteller for one, and I love doing presentations. And I called up. I said, I met this young fella. Everybody was asking me questions how about writing books and all the. I said, I met this author, this young fella, and he wrote a book. And I looked around the crowd and said, where is Pio? And he's way back there. And I said, stand up. And he stood up, and I said, come here, to the stage.
Wow.
And he stood by the stage down. But I said, no, I need you up here. And with your book. And so he stood in front of me with his book.
Yeah.
And so I know that part and other things that had happened will affect his life, as well as others in the future. And it's part of another book that I'm presenting. Actually, the picture of him is in there. So I'll send you a picture of that where I have him standing in front of me showing his book that he wrote.
I love that. Well, we have a somewhat of a similar story in a way that I was had a learning disability, and my middle school teachers told my mom they were shocked to find out that I became a women's health nurse practitioner, and I have ADHD as well, and I'm an author in 2 other books and a chapter of fertility and infertility. And, even my dad's like, I never thought that you would be an author. You just very surprised. It's a very surprising thing to come from me. So even the fact that I wrote a children's book is very surprising to a lot of people.
And the same with me. So I'm an author. I've written 5 of them. The 5th one is coming out actually in July. This is it's $1 billion. It's about communication skills. That is the foundation on all the things that we do. And then I wrote the first one that is Against All Odds, and then a number of other ones. And then the last one I'm going to show you, the 4th one, the other one is the 5th one, is Living Young, Dying Old. Picture of me, actually.
Yes.
I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. by
Wow.
coincidence, actually, trying to stay fit and healthy.
I need to share your book with my dad. He's 70, almost 74, and he's still actively fighting wildfires in America.
Constant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you copies of all these books. I'm going to sign them for you, and then
I
you can
love
share
that.
them with your dad,
He would love that. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Okay,
Yeah, that's amazing.
let's talk a little bit more about. So that was the first book is coming out. Then you did
Yes.
that,
Oh my
and then
goodness.
from there on in, how did it go further than that? Because all of a sudden now you created not only yourself as an author, but also Miles loves it
Yes.
what you're doing, and
Yes.
take us further.
Yes, I will. So essentially, I wrote the book. We are actually, it hasn't been published yet, which you're in the very first know because it's getting ready to launch in the next week, which
Okay.
is wild because it's been a labor of love because of the illustration. So writing a children's book, you must find an illustrator
Yeah,
and to envision what you want to envision. And it takes some time. So it took a little longer than I thought, but the illustrations are amazing and beautiful. And I'm going to send you a copy of the book because I have it.
I love it.
But yeah, so it's getting ready to launch. It's very exciting. But I had somebody say to me, a coach of mine, say, "You know that you have 3 children. You can't just write one book." What do you mean? Well, you have each kid needs a book. I'm like, oh, here we go. So now Mariah is gonna have her colorful tutus because she loves tutus. And then I just actually finished writing Micah's book, the 2-year-old, and it's gonna be about colors and toys. And then, believe it or not, last night, because I do a lot of meditation. In my meditation, it came to me that I need to write a book about even mommies have big feelings too. So the book is gonna be titled Even Mommies Have Big Feelings Too. And
Yeah,
it's going to be meant for kids to know that mommies have big feelings too. They get mad, they get frustrated, they cry, they get sad, they get worried, but to put it on a
all of
simplistic
that.
kid. Yes. So yeah, so that's where we're going. Oh my goodness, it's been wild. It's been amazing, but and to kind of piggyback on what you were saying about your ability to necessarily communicate your words with your feelings because not everybody feels comfortable with that and some children can't use their words. We have a friend who has an autistic child that doesn't speak many words and she's actually in Miles's book. I put her in there and her mother is able to use the colors for her feelings. And so it's not just helping children with that, but just anybody that can't find their words, any children that doesn't know what to say or feels uncomfortable or can't find the words or the feelings, they can use these colors. They can show the people around them how they're feeling. And then in turn, we can support them and give them the tools to work through that emotion.
Interesting, Constance, is this that growing up, exposure far too much that I should not have seen, we should not have seen,
Mm-hmm.
including dead bodies, people being
Yep.
dragged out of their houses, no food.
Yep.
In 1944, all the food was cut off to Holland by the German Adolf Hitler.
Yep.
And so we as kids, the 3 in the family, a brother 2 years older than me, a sister 1 year older, and brother 2 years older, and myself, we would go every morning. We would go with gunny sacks in the railroad yards and pick up anything edible and burnable. The reason that
Right.
we did as kids, they wouldn't shoot us, they would boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. And then,
Yeah.
as I already said, I still have the feeling of anxiety, hence the inner child, and the feeling of hunger, and still have pictures of far too much that we should not have seen. And then obviously the other part that happened to me is that ADHD, which was part of me already from birth, in my opinion. I'm not a doc, but that's
I
who I
agree.
am. And
Yep.
obviously, I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and they say he will not amount to much because he is just not bright enough. And but I always believed in me. So in my own little world, and in Holland, the way it was that if you go, then you get married, or you get a job, or you apply for a job, or you become an entrepreneur, you start negotiating with banks. There is always a question, where are your diplomas? Well, I didn't have diplomas. And so I felt I had to start anew again. And I always dreamed that I was going to go when I was 17, but my parents wouldn't let me. I was too young. And then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force at that point for more than 2 years, and then worked in lumber manufacturing in Holland. And then when I was 24, I left Holland, and I wanted to start with nothing. I wanted to start. I had two dreams. One, go to Canada. The other one is build a lumber mill. So I got a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money. And I knew I wanted to go to British Columbia. I did. Landed in Montreal, then took the train across Canada, from Montreal to Vancouver. 4 days, 5 nights. My God, that is a long way. And anyway, so when I arrived in Vancouver, went to the immigration department, and could speak English, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And fortunately, there was a German fellow, I could speak some German. So I told him I wanted to build a lumber mill. And he said, go to Prince George, 500 miles north, 800 kilometers for our European friends. And so I'm still in Prince George 60 years later. I can still see from here where the Greyhound station used to be. I stepped off with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. And
Wow.
but I had positive attitude. And even still today, I always have had that. Even in my own little world, I knew I was just as bright as the other ones. And I would stay the course. So I have always had that passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic, I work harder than anybody, even still today. I get up at 5:30. I always make my bed. I always think I'm late. And that's what I do. And since that time, I have all kinds of businesses but it took me, and that's the point that I wanted to make, till I was in the late 80s. I had been here already for, the 32 years.
Yes.
That somebody said to me, I want you to, I was not a good communicator. I could interact with about 2 or 3 people at the same time in my operations, but outside of that, I was not very good. And an ex-sister-in-law actually said to me, John, I want you to go with me to an organization called Toastmasters. And
my dad just told me about Toastmasters.
I said, what is it? They said, well, it's about communication skills. I said, okay. So I said, are you going to ask me any questions? He said, no. You just sit there, watch it, and if you like it, you go to it, and if not, not. So I was sitting in the middle of the meeting, and I thought it was interesting. And then somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about you. And I said, oh, my God, I'll never go back here. But I did. I stayed there for 10 years, and I became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level in Toastmaster, and it changed my life. Between being liberated by the Canadian Army and Holland, seeing too much that I shouldn't have seen, between failing grade 3 and grade 7, and between making the decision to go to the land of my heroes, Canada, and building a lumber mill, I did all of that. But the longest time it took me to discover, who am I? And that took me to Toastmasters, and then reading this book in 1997, January 1997, and knowing that not only was I having ADHD, but also dyslexia. And that changed my life. And since that time, I became an author. I'm working on my 6th and 7th book. I have, I'm not bragging about this, but I have 10 different companies, and I'm a very much in-demand speaker, and do all of that. But the other parts that played a big role for me, Constance, is that those elements, but also the counseling that I got, and recognizing the inner child.
Yes,
That,
exactly.
that
Beautifully
has to
said.
be discovered.
Had to be discovered. Has to. It affects everything. I love that you brought up Toastmasters. My I've been going on a few podcasts lately because of the book. And I have my dad listen to the podcast, and he's a great speaker as well. He's been speaking for years. He was a professor at a university, and he's a forestry professor. So trees. He's in the Forestry Hall of Fame.
Oh my! You should check me
Yes.
out because we have one of the largest secondary manufacturers in Canada, and so
Wow. I'll have to tell him because he's still doing consulting and working. But it's so funny because he just said to me last week, "Have you heard of Toastmasters?" And I said, "No, Dad, I haven't heard." And he's telling me all about it. And I went there, and that's how I learned to be a good speaker. And he was telling me all about it. So it's just funny that you bring that up and that you do lumber, and then it's just small world to me. It's
does he
very small.
live in Florida?
He lives in Florida. Right now, he's off in his camper around the United States, going to all the national parks, but
What's
he
his
does live
first
here.
name?
His name is Shepherd Zedeker.
Shepherd,
Shepherd. Yeah.
and you call him Shep.
We call him Shep. Yeah. My Miles' middle name is Shepherd. So Miles, my son, is Miles Shepherd. And they were born in the same month, Sagittarius, December, and they're just alike. They're little personalities.
So they're born when?
In December. They're both born in December.
Yeah, I was born November the 1st, 1940. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's
Can
amazing. Yeah. So
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
small world.
Yeah, isn't it? All the connections. Now,
Yeah.
Constance, make sure you show us or tell us about how can people contact you
Yes,
and
absolutely.
find
So
your book.
yes, find the book. Okay, so we have a website, and it's called www.colorfulbooksoffeelings.com. I can give it to you for the show notes. But it's on our website. It's going to give you all the information that you need to know about when to purchase the book. It's going to be on Ingram Spark and Amazon, and it's going to be coming very soon. Like probably, I would say in a week or two, my coach, I have an editing coach or a marketing coach. He's getting ready to help me do a pre-launch. And so I'm just getting up so it's called colorfulcapesofeelings.com is the website. And I also have Instagram, although it's not very active for this because she told me I had to get an Instagram page to get my book launched. So here I am over on Instagram trying to do that. And she's telling me get on all the podcasts, but the Instagram page is called colorful_feelings.books. So his book, Miles and the Colorful Capes of Feelings, is going to be launching in the next week. And then the other books looks to come. They're going to be coming soon. So they are for parents, educators, caregivers, parents, who want to help their children express their emotions through color in a very fun and creative way. And I'm just out here trying to help parents feel like they're not alone in dealing with their kids and their big feelings.
And create confidence for their young people and their children, especially when they understand they're going to be sharing this with other kids the same age as they have around the world.
Yes, and not to be ashamed of having feelings, those feelings, have those feelings. If I can have one less parent say to their child, "Stop crying, you're a boy, you don't need to cry anymore," or "It's not a big deal, don't cry about that," or "You're mad, get over it." So if I could reach the parents and get to those parents and help them to feel less uncomfortable when their child is having those feelings and give them the tools to walk their child through that emotion so that we're creating emotionally resilient children in the future, that's really my ultimate goal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so the fifth book and you can relate to this. Writing books is not easy for
No.
one, and for me, I had a lot of people say to me, "Hey, John, you had such an interesting life. You should write a book about it." Well, writing books is not easy, especially not for me.
Yeah.
So so for 20 years, I tried, I stopped, and then about 6 years ago, I was already in my mid-70s. If I don't do it now, it will never happen. So I started doing it. So it took me 80 years to, this book, Against All Odds, it took me 80 years to live it. 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. But it
Yes.
involves a lot of things, the cover, the font size, the pictures, should there be pictures, and all of those things. This book is not about how successful John is, but through all the ups and downs along the way. And then and as you already know, because you are now an author and doing books, is that, this one here, has just gone to the printers a week ago,
Wow.
because it was then, we prepared the books ourselves, they are print ready, and so
Mhm.
they will be printed out, about 5,000 copies of them initially, but they will be all on all the major medias. And this
Wow.
one is about, and that's why your dad will love it, is about
Yes.
communication skills.
I
That's
love
what
that.
is the foundation for a billionaire. It's not a book about how to become a billionaire, but how to develop communication skills. That's the foundation.
Yes. That is amazing. We need more of that in our life. Good communication skills. That could take away half of the battles in the world. Just communication.
Constance, now looking back at our podcast here, what a couple of things. What do you leave people with as they watch you? And you are now a podcaster or starting to podcast. It's
Yes.
amazing what happens. I started about 5, 6 years ago, first on the local level, and
Mhm.
then and did blogging, and then started a form of interaction on a local level. Then with a local television station, but then COVID came. I couldn't do that anymore. And then we
Yes.
said, what are we going to do now? I had an apartment here, and saying, well, maybe we should still turn it into a studio. And so we
Mhm.
did. So this is our studio. And then the next thing that we did,
Wow.
we
Beautiful.
engaged,
Love it.
pot match, and that became critical to us because that opened the world for us, and
Mhm.
more interesting guests like you and me getting together. And
Mhm.
so today you are my podcast number where I'm hosting 427.
Amazing.
I've been a guest on another 200 podcasts, I believe. And I
Love it.
love it,
Yeah.
and it is the media of the future.
It is. I do love it as well. I think it's a great way to meet. I've met so many interesting people and I just love connecting. So I agree. But if I could tell you something, and I don't know how many parents listen to your podcast, but we're not perfect and we're not going to be perfect. If you just start with something little, if you my really ultimately my number one thing as I tell parents is when a child is having a big emotion, or your spouse or your friend or your parent or whoever, if somebody is having a big emotion and they're reacting, instead of reacting back or becoming uncomfortable, get curious. Get curious. Why are they having this emotion? Why are they having reaction to this? Why are they sad? Why are they mad? That allows you to be present and not feel attacked, offended, scared, nervous, whatever you're feeling about their big feeling. Become curious. And then that curiosity will lend into research. Okay, they're having this feeling because this happened, that happened, they're overwhelmed, they're overstimulated, whatever. So anytime your child or your spouse or whoever has a big feeling, instead of retracting, reach out, become curious, and lend in to why they're having that reaction and that feeling. And that's going to open your mind up to a better way to feel about that emotion. And then you can give them the tools to walk through it. Curiosity.
I love it. Now, your podcast, what is your podcast? How do they, if they want to watch your podcast, what do they give us the, mine is On the Brink. What is
Mhm.
yours?
I so I just started. I
That's
actually
good.
am a just yeah, I'm just a guest on many podcasts now. But I have recently been recording a podcast that I haven't launched yet. It's called Momfidence. So it's going to be about how, as a mom, I had to develop my confidence as being a mother and how that was extremely difficult. And I'm a relatively confident person as a nurse practitioner and a person of knowing who I am. But then when motherhood came around, I got smacked down. I got knocked down. My confidence got knocked down. So over the last 7 years of having these children, I've learned that confidence comes over time, right? So I'm starting a podcast about that, and it hasn't been launched yet, but I will keep you updated on it. And then I hope to have you on my podcast.
I love it. So tell us again what it is. It is?
It's called Momfidence. So mom and confidence mixed together. And it is going to be about parents, not just moms, but dads, and how raising children and how you feel so unsure about what you're doing and how you're raising children, but how over time you build up your confidence and you listen to your intuition and you know that I got this. I can go out of the house with 3 kids and it won't be crazy. I know, you just listening to your intuition, because I learned with Miles and his seizures that I had so many doctors telling me different things. He's got this. This is why he's having seizures. No, this is why he's having seizures. No, he needs this medication. No, he needs that medication. And I had 3 doctors in the same practice arguing about what medication he should be on and what diagnosis he had, that I was overwhelmed. And I just had to tap into my intuition and know that this is what's happening. This is the right doctor to choose. This is the medication that's making him feel better, and treat him as my son, as an individual. And I had to bring my confidence as a mom about to listen to my intuition. And so that's why the podcast is going to be about that and how it stemmed.
I love it, Constance. Make sure and talk to Scott about it, and what's why you're starting it off. And then we love to be on your podcast as well.
Beautiful, yes.
So to your dad, make sure you share with him our books. This one is coming out in July. So I'm going to make sure we send you a copy of this one as well, and all the other ones. And I'm going to sign them all for you. And then to your dad, Shepherd, watch my podcast, in particular the one, Living Young, Dying Old.
You're going to love that one. That's what he's always saying. And he gave me a plaque years and years ago when I was going off to college that said, your attitude determines your altitude. And I still have that plaque.
I love it. I love it. So Constance, it was amazing to you, to your family, Andre as well. Stay in touch. I'll send the books in the next week. This podcast, I release them quickly. So this one will be released in the next 4 to 5 hours.
Wow, that is so good. The producer's on it.
Yeah, no, so we, whatever it is, we do, and if there is little hiccups here and there, I sneeze, then all of that stays in it. It seldom happens. In fact, about a year and a half ago, is that I introduced a guest, and all of a sudden the building started shaking. It was an earthquake. Fortunately, I didn't swear, but I said, oh my God, it's something along those lines. And so we left that even into the podcast. So this one will be, as we did it, it will be available to you and your guest in the next 4 to 5 hours.
I love it. Thank you. It was such a pleasure that I was on your podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time and for taking the chance on little me. It was beautiful.
Constance, say hello to Andre and your children, Miles in particular, and we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care.